Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Governance Made Easy webinar titled today, How to Create Your CEO Report That Will Delight Your Board. My name's Sean McDonald, and I'll be your moderator for the next 45 odd minutes. Firstly, my apologies for the email that was sent out. It had one of the links on there was the wrong link to the wrong webinar, so apologies for that. But thanks for attending today. We appreciate the effort you've made to be here for our live webinar. During the session, if you have any questions for Brett or the team, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll be answering these questions as we go, and we'll try to get through as many of these as we have time for. And finally, if you stay through till the end, which we hope you will do, and as is customary for our Board Pro webinars, we have a special treat for you. By answering our 1-minute survey at the end of the webinar, you'll go into the draw to win our beautiful gift hamper worth over $400. Now, for those of you who know a little bit or don't know a lot about Board Pro, we're a board software provider, essentially, and we serve around 20,000 users around the world. I think we're in about 26 different countries now, Brett, aren't we?
31 or 2, I heard the other day, Sean.
Wow. We enable organisations to prepare for and run their board meetings more effectively and efficiently with, you guessed it, clever software, with less time, and we deliver more impact and value for the organisation. And as much as we are a board software provider, or as sometimes called a board portal, our wider mission is to make the fundamentals of governance free and easy to implement for all organisations, especially those with resource constraints. Now, let me introduce our speaker and our panelists for today, starting with Brett. Brett Hergt is the co-founder and CEO here at Board Pro. Brett's a serial entrepreneur, having built several high-growth businesses over the last 20 years. And he brings tenacity, a strategic mindset, strong generalist business skills, and an enduring curiosity to the table. Good afternoon to you, Brett.
Thank you, Sean. Kia ora and welcome to everyone.
Stephen Bowman's good friend of Board Pro, is Managing Director of Conscious Governance and brings a great depth of experience with board reviews and strategic planning. Stephen has a wealth of executive and governance experience and has written over 14 books on governance and strategy. Good afternoon to you, Stephen.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone.
Linda Carroll is the CEO of Align Group. Linda has over 20 years governance experience, combined with over 30 years experience working with boards, CEOs and senior managers aligning strategy, governance, culture and performance. Linda's experience spans the wider state sector and not-for-profit sector boards, and she's also an accredited foresight practitioner through the Institute of Future in California. Good afternoon to you, Linda.
Tēnā koutou katoa.
Now, for the next 40-odd minutes, just relax, listen, and add to the discussion by asking as many questions as you have. The full recording of the webinar, along with the slide deck, the presentation that Brett's going to give, the white paper, and also the CEO report template, which is a Microsoft Word template, will be sent to you after the webinar today. So, Brett, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sean. So the first step to producing a good CEO report is to understand the context that it lives in. So I'll very briefly overview how I think about that broader context. It's not the topic for today, but if you have any questions about that, just drop them into the chat, and that's always useful feedback for us. So every board runs 5 primary processes, and those processes exist to deliver on the organisation's mission and purpose. And those 5 processes are supported by 5 primary inputs supplied by management, by which the board delivers 5 primary outputs. So if we move on a slide, Sean. So if we just jump through those very quickly, I'll just get my slides going in the back end as well. Just bear with me. So the processes are about developing and refreshing your strategy, including your vision and purpose, developing your policies, which provide a safe playing ground for management, developing the board's own work plan, and running the board meeting cycle. And that CEO report fits within that board meeting cycle, which is really about delivering oversight of the organisation and ensuring progress against the vision and strategy of the business. So then if we move on to there, the 5 primary outputs, this is where the... Sorry then.
Sorry, Brett, I was on the wrong slide, but we're on the right one now.
5 primary inputs. Go back one, Sean.
Beg your pardon?
There we go. So management really supports that board process by delivering operating plans, progress reports against that plan, a CEO report, decision paper, and risk review. So move us on one now, Sean. And then finally, the output of the board is a strategic mandate for the CEO, decisions, minutes, board action items, and policies. So the CEO report fits within this broader program of work that the board performs, and it's always there to support the board's job of delivering the future desired by its stakeholders and maintaining oversight of the organisation. Let's drill into the CEO report now, and I'll bring in our 2 wonderful panelists along the way. So if we go now to why a CEO report, directors often think that the main purpose of a CEO of the meeting is to be briefed by the chief executive about what's going on, whereas the main role of the board is always to ensure that the organisation is achieving what it should. So the agenda is the centrepiece of every board meeting and should focus on key decisions and discussions with supporting papers to help make those decisions. And the CEO report can be thought of as the ultimate supporting paper, sort of laying out the general business context from which the reader can then move to those detailed papers and support the business in making decisions. And it's also the easiest way for the CEO to exercise the delegated authority from the board to maintain the solvency and the general health of the business. So that's the overview for why a CEO report. Linda, any comments on that you'd like to make?
I think that it's an incredibly useful report for the board to actually understand just where the CEO is at right now. So what's keeping them awake at night? What are the highs and lows that they're experiencing? And it's an organisation-specific thing, isn't it, Brett, as to whether or not the key performance data are integral into the CEO report or whether they sit behind it. So I'm interested in hearing more about that.
Wonderful. We'll certainly come to that. Could you move us on a slide, Sean?
Certainly.
And we'll bring in Stephen. You've heard me a couple of times now talk about that board's role in terms of the future. And we stole this from you, Stephen. Could you elaborate for us?
Well, the real role of any board is not to meet, although some directors get that a bit confused at times, and they talk about the board meeting rather than the purpose of the meeting. And the purpose of any board really is to make the choices that create the future for the communities they serve. So therefore, any report coming to the board should be either providing new information that might provide new choices for the board to look at, or to provide updates on how well the choices are going at the moment and whether or not any change needs to occur. And as part of that also, how is this actually tied in with our strategy? How is it creating the future? Whose future, from whose point of view? These are all powerful strategic questions. And then the last one is for the communities that we serve. So for and with and on behalf of the communities we serve, where's our stakeholder engagement in all of this? What are we thinking? What are we missing? What are the different areas? So when we start to look at it from that perspective, the role of the board is to make choices. So we need to know what they are and if they're working, and to change them on a 5-cent piece if they need to change. And then we also need to continually be focusing on how is this creating the future, not just in the next 12 months, but the next 3 years, 5 years. Vision statement is 30, 40 years from now. Always keep that front of mind. And then also integrating in amongst that the communities that we serve, but that wider conversation about who are these stakeholders, who are these communities, which are the ones we're not serving, who aren't we hearing from? These are all the powerful questions that the board can provide oversight on. Brett?
Very nice. Thank you, Stephen. Can you roll us on a slide, Sean? So I always like to just slip into this presentation that it's worth remembering that board members often only engage with you as a CEO once a month, sometimes, every 2 months or even quarterly. And they really want to make a difference and they don't want to waste their time. So there's always a high expectation on the chair and the CEO that the board meeting is run really well. Hence, those written reports are a huge opportunity to communicate that you as a CEO are in control and you know what you want before a word has been spoken at the board meeting itself. So it's difficult to get it right all the time, but I can almost predict if I haven't put in enough work into having clarity in my papers and the CEO report, there'll be some degree of frustration and energy spent in the board meeting. So well worth investing is my message there. You roll us over, Sean, please.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about how to approach it. So kind of 3 points there for me to talk through. Just bear with me. So for the CEO to produce a report that gives real value to the board, we really want clearly defined targets and outcomes that mark success. There's no point winging it. We really don't want to just be talking about what's happening in the business. The best way to approach it, in my view, is to always have the cycle of goal. Are we achieving our goals? What can we do to improve our performance towards those goals? And it's really the board's responsibility to have those overarching success metrics or goals in mind. In reality, they often directly or indirectly delegate that to the CEO. It's often the CEO that will produce the 3-year goals or strategies, whatever time frame. But if there's any doubt there as a CEO, I always recommend, be proactive, produce that sets of goals, and then the CEO report, measures against those goals that the board has endorsed. And that ensures that the report is generally future focused. There is a degree you want to talk about the past and, use that context, but the general idea is that we're forward facing, and then that enables the board to be most effective in supporting the CEO, about, what might happen, what can we do to drive forward progress. Linda, you were curious about this. Do you want to add anything more? I note that we'll show some live examples with metrics in a moment. Is there anything you want to add to that context?
Well, I suppose the thing that's very top of mind is to make sure that we are clear on what our social responsibility is as well. So the board may actually have very clear goals that it's identified. They will always be much wider than financial goals. And we also want to make sure that those goals that have been identified dovetail into your strategy, but also that strategy includes your social responsibility. And if you're a cooperative, your members' expectations as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'll come back to you, Linda, later when we show the example, which is part of the template, which we have available on our website. You could maybe give us some feedback where we can, where you've seen good examples of people with their social goals included in the CEO report. So we'll keep you on standby for that one. So then if we move on to, just jump back one, Sean, onto point B on the how to approach it. So it's really good to remember that the CEO report kind of sets the stage for that agreed agenda. So as an example, if I was the CEO wanting to ask my board for increased investment and growth, and I had a specific paper on that investment ask, I would use the CEO report to say, hey, there's a firm platform in the business in general that it's not going to break if we invest more, if we add more customers. So that's an example of how the CEO report can set the stage for the agenda items that have already been agreed. And then finally, building the narrative. We'll come to some examples shortly. But I've noticed that 2 of the most common questions either chair or board members ask me in general, often outside the board meeting, is how's the business going and how are sales this month? So I think the CEO is just a wonderful opportunity to have a very succinct narrative to communicate that, hey, the business is going great, or sales have hit target. And if those things aren't good, to front foot any problems and get those sort of dealt with right out the front. Stephen, I'm sure you can comment on that. You might want to mention where's Wally.
So look, the key thing, what we're finding with a lot of boards these days is that they're absolutely insisting that if there's anything that is worthy of board discussion, or if there's anything that we need to decide, it has its own separate briefing paper. So what's happening more and more now with CEO reports is, as you described, Brett, the CEO is using that to give a heads up to the board. But if there's a more in-depth discussion needed on something, it's pulled out of the CEO's report. It's referred to in the CEO's report, but the actual discussion paper with its relevant backgrounds and links and context and so on is pulled out as a separate paper so it doesn't get lost. Same thing with a decision. If the CEO's after a decision of some sort, it gets pulled out as a separate decision paper. But the CEO's report these days is tending to give a bit of a heads up. So it's essentially like, let's have a summary of what the whole board meeting is going to be about. Let's read the CEO's report first. That'll give us a bit of a heads up of the key things. Then the more in-depth things occur as the agenda goes forward. So what we're starting to find now with really good CEO reports is two things. Number one is that they're starting to look at it both as a CEO and senior executive report or senior leadership team report. So, and they have the headlines that are in there that they want the board's attention. And then as part of that, they're pulling out any separate decision paper or discussion paper that will have its own separate time slot in the actual agenda. So usually with the CEO's report, there shouldn't be any discussion around it, because if there was a discussion, it should be pulled out as a discussion paper and have its own time frame. Brett?
Lovely. That sets us up very nicely for the last section. We'll spend quite a bit of time just looking at a best practice example and inviting questions from the group, which we've got a great panel group here to deal with. So we'll hold on that as well. Stephen, can you roll us on, Sean? So this last slide here, can I invite the audience now, any questions on this? So I've spent, 10 minutes now on context setting. So if there's any questions on those, please jump into the Q&A section and fire those in, and we'll pause and answer a chunk of those. And just while you're warming up to do that, just the elements of an effective CEO report. So Linda is, this has already been rolling out from Linda and Stephen. So what's on my mind? There's an opportunity as the CEO to look back, say what's gone well, what's got wrong, and share. I mean, I find that the board really, because they're there such a small amount of time and they need to have the context brought back up to speed, they're never going to understand all the detail of the CEO. The good board members over the years are always interested. The really best ones ask really good questions and stretch me and dig out of me things I don't even always realise that I'm thinking about the business. So just such a good opportunity in the CEO report to maybe prompt the 2 or 3 things that are top of mind to invite that discussion dialogue. Linda?
Look, I just think this is so lovely, Brett, because it does actually just summarise exactly what you're looking for. It gives you the state of the nation in a very short, succinct document. And the thing that I don't like is getting a CEO report that is 10 pages long. I just want it to set the scene for me. And yes, we have these papers that are for information or for decision attached to it, but this is what actually sets the scene for what is going to be key in the meeting. So I think it's a great summary.
Thank you. Now, Stephen, I'll invite you in on looking to the future. We've had wonderful dialogue with you over the many webinars now. Your thinking is well developed about how the job of the CEO report of the reports to look to the future. Do you want to comment on that 1B section?
Yeah, look, the looking to the future is not as hard as most people think it is, because in there, typically we'd be saying, what are some of the emerging issues that I don't want you as the board to spend any time on yet, but just be assured that the staff are starting to look at. For example, artificial intelligence. As a board, if you haven't already started putting some time and effort into looking at artificial intelligence, or at the very least instructed your staff to start developing some plans around that, then you're missing the boat totally. So I'd want to see stuff from the CEO's report that's saying, look, here are some of the emerging issues, not necessarily positive or negative, they just are. And we as a staff are starting to do a couple of dot points on what we're doing in that area. The risks or the concerns coming up, again, one of the greatest things we can do is to help shape our board's view about risk. If the senior executive and the CEO are saying, here are our two key risks we see occurring in this area, and here's how we're managing those and turning them to advantage and looking at the opportunities that are coming from that risk, that form of reporting will start to change the framework of how the board see risk, from one of compliance to one of possibility to one of opportunity, and if you're really smart, to one of potential revenue possibilities that might come from it. And then what keeps me awake at night times, I guarantee that'll be the first heading anyone looks at before they read the rest of the board reports, because this is what the CEO can then alert you to, not because it's a problem, but because their intellect is going into it. This is where I'm, as the specialist expertise in this sector, managing this type of organisation, this is what's keeping me awake at night. And I don't really need your input, directors, because if there were, I'd have a separate discussion paper. But what I do want to do is just to keep you alerted of, here are some upcoming things. Now, as soon as we start to talk about keep your view on some upcoming things, by that very nature, you're starting to be more strategic as a board. You're not just getting reports on busyness, you're actually asking the board to start thinking about some of these areas, and at some stage we will actually then do a deep dive in it, or we will get an external person to speak about it, or in fact we'll review our strategic plan to see whether or not this is strategically important enough to add to it. Brett.
Thank you, Stephen. I think that's covered two as well nicely. Sean, do you want to take us into some Q&A?
Sure. We have one from Gavin Findlay. Should the CEO talk to his report in the meeting or just ask for questions?
I'm going to let our two panelists. So have we got a volunteer to take that one?
Yeah, me.
Go.
One of the first boards I joined over 25 years ago was a school board, and we would get a chief executive's report, which was in excess of 25 pages, and basically the school principal would almost read us his report. Please do not read your report. We can read, us board members, so it's much better if you just pull out one or two things that are really top of mind that you just want to share because they excite you or they worry you or whatever, but then basically say, so what questions do you have?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a nice segue into the question from Sally here. Her question is, are you saying that the CEO report should be no more than 10 pages?
Oh, less. In my view, less. Less is more.
Right.
What do you think, Brett?
Oh, look, I aspire to CEO report. I think in my next session, you're stealing my thunder. I suggest we try and do 5 to 10 pages. We've actually, over the last year or so, been continuously driving. So we only do quarterly. We do a more detailed CEO report. So we endeavour for 2 months out of the quarter to have effectively a 3 or 4 page CEO report, including some financial commentary. Because really I've found over the years that if you have too many pages and it's constantly trying to expand, I think it's just human nature of boards to try and, to do too much to expand it. And it's a job for someone really on the chair to just keep pushing that back down, because the job is less is more, because you can focus more on the best things. Stephen, you can probably add some nice commentary to less is more.
Yeah, so the best CEO reports I've seen and that the boards have reported that are really useful for them are those that summarise the key information. And I saw one just a few weeks ago where, in fact, the front page of the CEO's report was 3 very simple dashboards. And they were all one-liners, these dashboards. The first one, how are we going on our strategic plan? Are we on target? Are we behind target? Or are there emerging issues? So immediately, if there are emerging issues, I go straight to the strategic plan report and read that component of it. And then another one was on risk. Are there any new emerging risks? Are we pretty much on top of where we thought we'd be with our risks? Are there some big issues? So there were just 3 of those: strategy, risk, and then the other one was finances. And they were just 3 simple, one line in colour headliners. Almost immediately, a finger on the pulse of the patient sort of thing. It was just brilliant. And then they were supported by others behind that. And you might have 4 or 5, but not 40. So simpler is better, as long as the supporting documentation either provides the discussion points that we need the board to discuss and to come to some sort of agreement on where to from here, or decision papers that say, here are the 3 options that we've got here. We can make any of these 3 options work, but our preference is for number 2 for the following reasons. Board, over to you. Where do you want to take this? So those sort of, the CEO's report, my view, the best ones I've seen are 4 or 5 pages, and they also include similar things from their operational departments as well too. So it becomes a CEO and senior leadership team report. And if it doesn't make it into those 4 papers, then they're probably not really strategically important issues, which raises the issue, well, why are we reporting on some of these things then? Brett.
Well, a few more questions here to get through, team. Simon asks, should the What's on My Mind section open the CEO report in something short, sharp and succinct? This should lead prior to the metrics, etc. What are your views on that?
I'll lead off on that, but I'm very interested in the panelists' view on this, because we were just debating this internally yesterday. We've got a couple of views whether we have it before or after. I've always preferred to put the metrics, the high-level metrics at the top, and you'll see on the template at the moment, that's what we've got. My head of marketing was suggesting the other day that I have my sort of short, succinct paragraph at the bottom as the closing point of page 1. My head of marketing was suggesting we flip it around the other way. I think I personally like to start with the numbers, that high view, because I think the board will go there early for context and then read my paragraph at the end to sort of close it out, their one-page view of it all. Can we take your view on that, Linda?
Yeah, I'm of the same view as you, Brett. I like, as a board member, to be very clear on what the metrics are. I want to know how we're tracking. And so then to actually get your paragraph after is a perfect order for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Another one that's just come in from Amanda. Interested in where this type of CEO report would sit in the agenda. Should it be in the 4Info or operational reports and sit at the bottom of the agenda? Where would it sit typically?
Now, Stephen, can you?
Yeah, this typically it would be a paper for noting. Now, what happens with papers for noting? If you imagine your own agenda, it says, typically it'll go present, apologies, declaration of interest, and then there would be all papers that are for noting are approved as being accepted. So that covers the formal bit. But that means you have to have read it. And if in that paper for noting there is a strategic decision that's required by the board, that will then appear under one of the first headings in the next part of the agenda, which is strategic issues requiring board decision, something along those lines. So typically all papers for noting should be at the end of the agenda, what's called a block agenda, so that we can then approve them. If there's anything that a director thinks is worthy of board discussion that is currently in a board paper that is for information only, they must petition the chair prior to the board meeting to have that item pulled out of the items for noting section or the block agenda and put back on the agenda as a paper for discussion. But that director has to convince the chair prior to the board meeting, not at the board meeting. So as Linda and Brett have said, you should never have the opportunity where, do you just want to talk to your report? No, it's either a paper that is for noting or a paper that has a discussion point that has been well thought out or a paper that's for decision. And if directors don't agree with that, then they have to chat with the chair prior to the board meeting, which funnily enough means they have to have read the board papers and have started forming some views on it. Brett?
Yeah, look, I think that's excellent, Steve. And we know from talking to hundreds and hundreds of directors over the years that one of the great risks to an effective board meeting is the board getting too operational. So we've found this over the many years ourselves. We always do exactly as Linda and Stephen are discussing. We put that CEO report towards the back, and it just emphasises the job of the board is to make strategic decisions. And so therefore to address those those papers early. Even if they hop down and read the CEO report first, we've reinforced through the agenda that the first job is to deal with strategic items. Let's move on, Sean, to we've set everybody up really nicely to have a look at our best practice template, and then we can use the last 10, 12 minutes to just walk through that and take more questions. And we can circle back to some of these that we haven't addressed.
Yeah, sorry, we will get to these questions in just a minute, everybody.
So here's what our free CEO report template looks like. And what I want to emphasize straight out of the gate is, please, if you pick this up and use this, move it around, mash it up, make it look like what works for your organization. What we're trying to communicate here is, here's some really good principles, a set of metrics at the top, as Linda was discussing earlier. As a director, she likes to see, just maybe half a dozen high-level metrics that that speak to what are the core numbers in the business and how well we're doing on them. The example here comes from an ICT business, modeled on an ICT business I ran many years ago. So the context will be different for every business. But the idea of 4 or 5 sections culminating in a succinct CEO summary is the idea that if a board member has some emergency in their life, if they've run out of time, they can prepare for the board meeting at the very least by reading one single page, which gives them the overview of the whole business. Stephen, comments you'd add to that?
Yeah, that's just brilliant, Brett. It really is. I mean, the thinking behind it, the way it's also answered 2 or 3 of the questions that people have asked as well too. That when people are talking at top of mind or things that keep me awake at night, it shouldn't be about needy things. It should be about what are the big issues that I'm charged as a CEO to grapple with, and what are some insights for the board. Then the big wins and learnings, I think, is really good. So no, I think this is all the really good CEO reports I've seen have this thinking. They all look different, but they have this thinking.
Yeah, it picks up there. I noted you talked earlier, Stephen, about the linkage between the CEO report and the items of business, the decisions for the board meeting. So we've done this very successfully for many years.
Exactly.
Our second section of key decisions and discussions. So that centers me as the CEO writing my report. I know the purpose of this report is to support those 3 topics there we've listed, be they for discussion or decision, etc.
Can I make a comment on this too?
I
think it's the role of the CEO in all of this is also to educate the board. Many directors haven't been born with the skills of how to read reports or how to ask for the best from their CEOs. And many directors still think to this day that more is better. And one of our roles as CEOs is to help educate them in a respectful but also firm way that, look, in the end, what we need to do as a board is to really focus on creating the future. If you're interested in how busy I am, please set aside a time and come and spend an hour with me in the office, or as part of our reinduction program, we'll take you around to all of our activities over the next 12 months so you get to feel and smell and know what it's like. But what we should be doing as a board through the work that I support you with is to help you focus. And so therefore, the reports I'm going to write for you as a board are there purely and simply to give you unfettered information that provides you with the focus that you need as a board. And that's the sort of key message, because oftentimes CEOs see themselves as the recipient of board direction rather than the guidance to help the board be more focused in what they need to do. And I think sometimes as CEOs, we can step up into that space more.
Well said, Stephen. So I think that's probably given good stimulus for more questions. So please keep those coming. But I'm just conscious of time. Can you move us on to, I just want to show a couple of examples of CEO summaries that I've written over the years for Board Pro, and we'll bring you and Linda in a moment on at least 1 or 2 of these. So here's one on the very early days of Board Pro, is when we were a startup. So I was just looking the other day back through examples and found this one and thought, oh, here was quite a nice one. Just three or four sentences I've written. And really what I'm trying to do here is to say, So my board are vitally interested at this stage in the life cycle of BoardPro. We've taken on maybe $750,000, $1 million of capital. We're still in the baby steps of actually taking a very, minimum viable product to market and establishing whether we've got a sales and marketing model that works. I think by now we'd achieved and declared product market fit. We knew what we had was good, but there was a lot of uncertainty in terms of would our go-to-market work. So you can see in my summary, I've just drilled straight into, is the sales and marketing machine working? What's the biggest concern? I'm saying, yes, it is working, but hey, it's still our biggest challenge. At this stage, we're at a board that we're unfamiliar with experimentation. So I'm highlighting in my summary that, hey, experimentation is the way forward for us as a business. I'm kind of encouraging the board to think in that way. So kind of laying a platform for them to know, how am I thinking at a macro level about this startup, this highly risky early stage business? Linda, any comments you would have on, this or other examples you've had with CEO summaries?
I think that this is a great example, Brett, for what you were talking about as a new startup and picking out what the board would want to see. And I think that each organisation will need to think very carefully about what it pulls out. So if you're looking, for example, at one of the boards that I'm on at the moment, which is in the cultural sector, we've got all sorts of challenges facing us at the moment, not the least because of the tightening of people's belts. And so the summary that they might actually provide to the board would be quite different, but it would pick up on those particular concerns around audience numbers and the future and how they think it might change. But I love the fact that it's short, it's punchy, and it just says what is top of mind.
Excellent. Thanks, Linda.
Now, Sally Dunbar has just asked a question which she answered herself, but I'll just share it. Does BoardPro offer any CEO report templates? And the answer is yes. This will be included in the handout. So it's a Microsoft Word template that you can use, move around, edit, change to suit your business. That'll be provided in the handout. Do we want any more questions at this stage, Brett?
Yeah, if we've got time, Sean, shall we try and do a few more to round out, and then you cut us off when you need to do the closing?
We've got one more slide from you here.
Oh, that's just another example of a CEO summary. We're sharing all of these slides so people can read that at their leisure afterwards. Shall we move on to just use a few minutes from Q&A?
If I can just give an example, Brett, where people, there was one question on there, could we provide more not-for-profit examples? and I think the response there is, if you understand what the key business drivers are for your organisation, whether it be profit, non-profit, whatever sector you happen to be in, disability, education, aged care, professional, trade, whatever it might be, if you understand what the 2 or 3 key business drivers of that are, then that essentially will give you the insights about how you start off your CEO's report. We've just recently been dealing with a TAFE college, for example, and their reporting was quite extensive, but it left me always as a director with 2 key questions. So what do you want me to do with this information? And the second one is, where's Wally in this? Don't make me search for Wally. Where's the big thing in this that you want us to focus on? And it was interesting, in all their reports, there was very little about student numbers or student engagement, yet they're a tertiary education sector. And so the board refocused on what are our 2 or 3 big business drivers, and they got rid of the word financial sustainability because they realised that that was all to do with student numbers. So in fact, the real issue was student recruitment, student retention. And so it's helped them really refocus on their core purpose and their vision as an organisation, rather than just relying on financial metrics. So that might be useful for your board and your CEO to actually look at what are our 2 or 3 key business drivers in here, that if we understood that, it answers a whole lot of other questions simultaneously.
Okay, Joy asks, what is the panel's view of a balanced scorecard format incorporating the 4 perspectives: process, people, finance, customer into the CEO report?
Can I kick off with that one?
Yes, Steve.
We recently had one of our organisations we're working with did exactly that, and they used their balanced scorecard, but they still missed the point. So they provided the data on the balanced scorecard, but there was no critical analysis of what it meant. So I would rather have, if you're going to do a balanced scorecard, 90% of the boards that I know that use balanced scorecard fall into the trap of not going into the critical analysis of what it actually means. So, you have all these lovely balanced scorecard things. So what? What's the big issue that we as a board need to focus on our time on? What are the one or two big things that come out from this balanced scorecard that we need to focus on? Don't confuse me with a page of pretty graphs. Do focus me on these one or two big issues that we need to grapple with that is worthy of our time as directors. Brett?
Interesting idea. That a way you could outwork that is you could potentially convert the metrics dashboard into 4 boxes with each of your quadrants. Have a 2 or 3 metrics on each with a dash, a traffic light system on it. It calls out the red and orange, and to Stephen's point, you then comment on that either on page 1 or subsequent pages. So you could experiment with that for sure in a CEO report format.
Susan asks, we have some board members that love to have details on activities we've been undertaking, which we currently do through a 3-page operations summary as an appendix to the CEO report. But I've been successful in cutting it down from 10 pages. Any ideas on weaning directors off the need to see every little thing that's been going on in the business?
Linda, this sounds like you.
Putting them on a good governance course so they understand the difference between governance and management, maybe? No, I'm being facetious. I think that there are directors who will always want to have that sort of information. The question is, I suppose, where you put it, and if they do need it, then to put it in the 4 information papers. It's difficult because you really do need to let them know that they need to have confidence. And that's one of the things, I think, is that often directors are asking for more information because they don't have necessarily confidence that they are getting the correct information or the right information. So it might be an opportunity for you to have a wider, more strategic conversation about, are they getting what they need? What else do they need from you to have the assurance that you are across what needs to be across?
Some great ideas to add on to that, Linda, too, is I've seen some boards that have been through pretty rough patches where they found that the data wasn't actually accurate and the CEO was actually manipulating some stuff, and this happens more times than you could imagine, that they've actually included as part of the report where the data has come from and who has cited the data. And so that instead of the directors having to think they all have to cite it, it's gone through our internal audit, it's also gone through our finance audit risk management committee, and it's also been cited by the CEO. And so that gives comfort that at least there's some rigour behind where the original data was and the veracity of it.
Let's have one last question, shall we? How do you get senior leadership to be more forward-thinking in their contribution to the CEO report?
I'll kick off on that one. So I think I ask each of my senior leaders to report. I try and delegate. I try and make them mini CEOs of their function. So they report through to me. I'll summarise that to board. Sometimes I will include their paper as an attachment in the board papers, and I'll certainly get them up in front of board and I'll coach and support them, but put them live in front of boards. So I think almost any board of any even minimal value will engage well with management and teach them the merits of actually reporting well. So that's kind of my tactic I use there. Linda, is there anything you'd add to that?
No, I always encourage the chief executive to bring senior management to the actual board meeting to talk to the board directly about their area of the business. It's a way for them to understand the governance lens, for them to see the tone of the board, and and for the board to indicate the value that they place on that person's contribution.
I think that's probably us, Sean, for time, is it?
I think it is. We're just on time, so I'll wrap up now. Please, everybody, feel free to connect with our presenters today. Their LinkedIn details are right on the screen here. And if you'd like to be put in touch with Brett, Stephen, or Linda, please indicate your interest at the on the survey at the end. Now, we have a number of great webinars coming up over the next 2 to 3 weeks. The next one on our schedule, October 19th, is board remuneration and directors' fees, research findings. That'll be quite an interesting one. We also have a really neat masterclass which went on sale this morning. It's for an event in November 14th to November 21st. It's Mastering the Art of Effective Board Meeting Minutes. So if you'd like to attend that, or one of your executive assistants attend that, or even if it's the CEO that takes the minutes, it's a great course to consider. So thanks, everybody. Hope you got plenty out of this webinar today. As I mentioned, though, in the introduction, you'll receive an email with the session today, the recording of the webinar, and you'll receive a copy of the CEO report template that Brett demonstrated, and also our CEO report guidebook. Now, as you leave the webinar, don't forget to complete our quick 1-minute survey, and you'll go into the draw for our hamper, and we'll announce the winner tomorrow. So finally, thanks everybody for your attendance. Thanks, Brett, Stephen, and Linda for your time and knowledge today. We will see you at the next webinar, everyone.